The sun burned hot in the Arizona sky. It was the summer of 1887, and Jack Morrison stood on his front porch looking out at his dying land. The grass had turned brown. The creek that used to flow with clear water was now just cracked mud. His cattle were thin and weak, their ribs showing through their dusty hides. Jack was 32 years old. His grandfather had built this ranch 40 years ago, back when the land was wild and full of promise. His father had worked it after that, raising cattle and making a good life. Now it was Jack's turn, but the land was turning against him. The drought had been going on for 3 months. Every day the sun rose hot and angry, and every night Jack went to bed wondering if tomorrow would be the day he lost everything. His ranch hands had left one by one. First Tommy went, saying he had family in California. Then Miguel and his brother packed their things and headed south to Mexico. Last week even young Billy rode off, barely old enough to grow a beard but smart enough to know when a ship was sinking. Now only old Henry remained, and Henry was 65 with a bad back. He stayed because he had nowhere else to go. Jack walked down the porch steps, his boots kicking up dust with each step. Everything was dust now. The wind blew it into his eyes, his mouth, his house. He could taste it in his food and feel it in his lungs when he breathed. He walked toward the barn where his remaining 12 cattle stood in the shade, too hot and tired to even moo. He had started with 40 head this spring. Some had died. Others he had sold cheap just to get a few dollars. He filled their water trough from the well, watching the precious water splash into the wooden container. The well was getting lower each day. Soon it would be dry too. Then what would he do? A ranch without water was just empty land. Empty land was worthless. Henry came out of the barn, wiping his face with an old red cloth. "Boss, I think we might lose another one tonight," he said quietly. He pointed to a brown cow lying in the corner. "She ain't eaten nothing for 2 days," Jack nodded slowly. There was nothing to say. They both knew how this would end. "I'm going to ride out and check the creek again," Jack said. "Maybe there's water upstream." Henry looked at him with tired eyes. They both knew there would be no water, but checking gave them something to do. Hope was a hard thing to kill even when everything else was dying. Jack saddled his horse, a gray mare named Silver. She was thin too, but she was strong and loyal. They had been together for 7 years. He patted her neck and climbed into the saddle. The leather was hot from the sun, burning through his pants. He rode east toward the hills, following what used to be the creek. The path was easy to follow because nothing grew there anymore, just cracked earth and a few dead bushes. The heat made the air shimmer and dance. In the distance he could see vultures circling. Something had died out there. Maybe a deer or a coyote. Death was common now. After riding for an hour, Jack saw something strange. There was a dark shape near a large rock. At first he thought it was a dead animal, but as he got closer, he saw it was a person, a woman lying face down in the dirt. Jack jumped off his horse and ran to her. He turned her over gently. She was young, maybe 20 years old, with long black hair and brown skin. She was Apache. He could tell by her clothes and the beaded necklace around her neck. Her lips were cracked and bleeding from the sun. Her breathing was so shallow he had to put his hand near her mouth to feel it. Jack looked around. There was no one else in sight. No horse, no water, no supplies. How had she ended up here alone? What had happened to her? He knew that bringing an Apache woman to his ranch could cause problems. The settlers and the Apache people did not get along. There had been fights and killings on both sides. Many people in the nearby town of Copper Ridge would not like this. They would talk. They would judge him, but Jack could not leave her here to die. His mother had raised him better than that. A life was a life, no matter whose it was. He picked her up carefully. She was light, too light. She had not eaten well for some time. He placed her in front of him on Silver, holding her steady with one arm. Her head rolled against his chest. The horse shifted under the extra weight but did not complain. The ride back to the ranch took longer with 2 riders. The sun was starting to set when Jack finally saw his house in the distance. Henry was sitting on the porch and he stood up quickly when he saw Jack approaching with someone. "What you got there, boss?" Henry called out. "Found a woman in the desert," Jack said, climbing down carefully. "She's near dead from the heat. Help me get her inside." Henry's eyes went wide when he saw she was Apache, but he said nothing. He just opened the door and helped Jack carry her into the house. They laid her on Jack's bed, the only real bed in the house. Jack got water from the kitchen and a clean cloth. He wet her lips, letting just a few drops fall into her mouth. Too much water too fast could make her sick. You sure about this, boss? Henry asked quietly. Folks in town won't like it. I don't care what folks in town like, Jack said, his voice firm. She's a human being and she needs help. Henry nodded and went back outside. Jack stayed by the bed, giving her water every few minutes. As the night grew dark, he lit a lamp and watched her breathe. She did not wake up. Her face was peaceful but showed signs of suffering. There were scratches on her arms and a bruise on her cheek. Who was she? Why was she alone? Jack had so many questions, but they would have to wait. The first night passed slowly. Jack slept in a chair next to the bed, waking up every hour to check on her. By morning, her breathing was stronger. That was a good sign. The second day was the same. She did not wake up, but she was fighting. Her body was working to heal itself. Jack gave her water and broth made from the last chicken Henry had killed. He dripped it into her mouth slowly, and she swallowed without waking. On the second night, Jack fell asleep in the chair, exhausted from worry and work. He dreamed of rain, of his creek flowing full and clear, of green grass growing tall. It was a beautiful dream. He woke to find her eyes open, watching him. They were dark brown, almost black, and filled with fear and confusion. She tried to sit up quickly, but her body was too weak. She fell back onto the pillow, breathing hard. Easy now, Jack said softly, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. You're safe. You were dying in the desert. I brought you here. She stared at him, understanding but not trusting. Her hand moved to her necklace, checking if it was still there. Jack had not touched it. Do you speak English? He asked. She said nothing, just watched him with those careful eyes. Jack stood up slowly and walked to the kitchen. He came back with a cup of water and some bread. He set them on the small table next to the bed and stepped back. You must be hungry, he said. Eat, drink. No one will hurt you here. She looked at the food, then at him, then back at the food. Slowly, carefully, she reached for the water. Her hands shook as she lifted the cup to her lips. She drank it all, then ate the bread in small bites. When she was done, she looked at him again. This time there was a question in her eyes. My name is Jack Morrison, he said, pointing to himself. This is my ranch. You are safe here. She was quiet for a long moment. Then in a voice rough from not speaking, she said one word. Takala. It was her name. Jack nodded and smiled a little. Takala, he repeated. That's a good name. She did not smile back. She just pulled the blanket up higher and closed her eyes. Jack understood. She needed more rest. There would be time for questions later. He walked outside where Henry was feeding the cattle. She awake? Henry asked. Yes, Jack said. Her name is Takala. Henry looked worried. What are you going to do with her? Jack looked out at his dying ranch, at the empty sky that promised no rain, at the land his grandfather had carved from the wilderness. I don't know, he said honestly, but she needed help and I gave it. That's all I know for sure. The sun was rising again, hot and merciless. Another day of drought, another day of struggle. But now there was something different on the ranch. A stranger who had come from nowhere, carrying secrets Jack did not understand yet. He did not know that this Apache woman would change everything. He did not know that she held the key to saving his ranch. He did not know that his simple act of kindness would lead him down a path he never expected. All he knew was that he had saved a life, and that had to count for something in this hard, dry world. 3 days had passed since Takala woke up. She was stronger now, able to walk around the small house without feeling dizzy, but she still did not talk much. She watched Jack and Henry with careful eyes, like a wild animal that might run at any moment. Jack gave her space. He understood fear. He had seen it in horses that had been treated badly. You could not force trust. It had to come slowly, like water seeping through rock. During the day, Takala stayed inside the house, away from the burning sun. Jack saw her looking out the window sometimes, staring at the brown hills in the distance. She looked sad, like she had lost something important, but when Jack tried to ask her questions, she would turn away and go silent. On the fourth morning, Jack woke up to find Takala in the kitchen. She had made coffee and was cooking eggs in his old iron pan. The smell was wonderful. He had been eating stale bread and beans for weeks. Good morning, Jack said, surprised but pleased. Takala nodded but did not speak. She put the food on a plate and handed it to him. Then she poured coffee into a chipped white cup. Thank you. Jack said. You didn't have to do this. She looked at him for a moment, then said in her rough voice, You saved my life. I work now. I pay back. Jack shook his head. You don't owe me anything. You were sick. Any decent person would have helped. Her dark eyes studied his face, looking for lies. White men are not kind to Apache, she said quietly. Jack could not argue with that. He had seen how people in town treated the Apache people who came to trade. They were suspicious and rude. Some were worse than that. Maybe not all white men, Jack said. But I try to be fair. Takala said nothing more. She took her own plate and ate in silence. After breakfast, Jack went outside to work. The day was already getting hot. Henry was at the well, pulling up water for the cattle. The rope was getting longer each time. The water was running out. Boss, we got maybe a week left, Henry said, his face grim. Maybe less. Jack felt his stomach tighten. A week, then what? He could not move the cattle. They were too weak to walk far. And even if he could move them, where would they go? The whole territory was in drought. He spent the morning checking fence lines and trying to find something for the cattle to eat. But there was nothing. The land was dead. When he came back for lunch, Takala was sitting on the porch. She stood up when she saw him. I need to talk to you, she said. Her voice was serious. Jack sat down on the porch steps and waited. I have been watching your land, Takala began. Your animals are dying. Your water is almost gone. I know, Jack said heavily. I've been trying to figure out what to do. Takala was quiet for a moment, like she was deciding something important. Then she said, I can help you. Jack looked at her, surprised. How? There is water in the hills, she said, pointing east to the rocky area past his land. Secret water. My grandmother showed me when I was a little girl. Jack frowned. I've been in those hills 100 times. There's no water there. Just rocks and dust. You do not know where to look, Takala said. It is hidden. Sacred place. Apache people know it, but we do not tell outsiders. Jack felt a small spark of hope, but he pushed it down. He had been disappointed too many times. Why would you tell me? He asked. If it's sacred to your people? Takala looked away toward the distant hills. Because you saved my life when you could have left me to die. Because I see you are a good man, even if you are white. And because... She paused, her voice growing softer. Because I have nowhere else to go. If I show you the water, maybe you let me stay here. Jack understood then. She was alone, just like him. She needed a home, just like his cattle needed water. You can stay here whether you show me water or not, Jack said firmly. But if you know where water is and you're willing to show me, I would be grateful. Takala looked at him again, and this time he saw something like relief in her eyes. We go tomorrow morning, she said. Before the sun gets too hot. That night Jack could barely sleep. He kept thinking about the possibility of water. Real water, flowing water, enough to save his cattle and his ranch. It seemed too good to be true. But Takala had been certain. She had no reason to lie to him. At dawn, Jack and Takala prepared for the journey. Henry wanted to come, but his back was hurting badly. He stayed behind to watch the ranch. You be careful, boss, Henry said. Those hills are rough. Jack saddled Silver and another horse for Takala. She climbed up easily, moving like someone who had ridden horses her whole life. They rode east, following the dry creek bed just like Jack had done the day he found her. The morning air was cool, but Jack knew it would not last. By noon, the sun would be brutal. They needed to move fast. Takala rode ahead, confident and sure. She did not follow any path that Jack could see. She seemed to know the land by feeling, by memory, by something Jack could not understand. After an hour, they reached the rocky hills. Jack had been here before many times. He saw nothing but boulders and scrub brush and dead trees. There's nothing here, Jack said, trying to keep the disappointment from his voice. You do not see because you do not know how to look, Takala said. She climbed down from her horse and walked toward a cluster of large rocks. My grandmother told me, the earth keeps secrets from those who take without asking. But she shares with those who respect her. Jack followed her, leading both horses. Takala moved between the rocks, touching them gently like they were old friends. Then she stopped at what looked like a solid wall of stone. Here, she said. Jack looked at the rocks. He saw nothing special. I don't understand. Takala smiled a little, the first real smile he had seen on her face. Watch. She squeezed through a narrow gap between two boulders. A gap so thin Jack had never noticed it. He followed, turning sideways to fit through. His shirt caught on the rough stone, but he pushed forward. On the other side was a hidden canyon, narrow and deep. And in the middle of the canyon, impossibly, water trickled from a crack in the rock face. It was not a lot of water. Just a thin stream, no thicker than his thumb. But it was water. Real, clear, beautiful water. Jack stared at it, unable to believe his eyes. He walked forward slowly, like the water might disappear if he moved too fast. He knelt down and touched it with his hand. It was cold and clean. He brought some to his mouth and drank. It tasted sweet. The best water he had ever drunk in his life. How? He whispered. How is this possible? Deep water, Takala said. It comes from far underground, from places the sun cannot touch. This land looks dead, but underneath it is alive. Jack stood up, his mind racing. This water could save his cattle. It could save his ranch. It was not enough to fill his creek, but it was enough to fill troughs to keep his animals alive until the drought broke. This is on my land? He asked. Takala nodded. Yes, the canyon is hidden, but it is inside your fence. I checked. Jack turned to her, his heart full of gratitude. You saved my ranch, he said quietly. You saved everything. Takala looked uncomfortable with his thanks. You saved my life first, she said. This is more than a life, Jack said. This is my family's legacy. My grandfather's dream. Everything. They stood in silence, listening to the gentle sound of water dripping onto stone. In this hard, dry land, it was the most beautiful sound in the world. We need to bring the cattle here, Jack said, thinking out loud, or find a way to carry the water to them. Carrying will take too much time, Takala said. Better to bring them here. But the path is narrow. We will need to clear it, Jack nodded. We can do that. Henry and I can work on it today. They rode back to the ranch, and Jack felt lighter than he had in months. When they arrived, Henry saw the look on Jack's face and knew immediately that something good had happened. You found water? Henry asked, his old eyes bright with hope. We found water, Jack confirmed. Takala showed me a hidden spring in the hills. Henry looked at Takala with new respect. Miss, I don't know how to thank you. Takala shrugged, still uncomfortable with gratitude. I did what was right. The next 3 days were hard work. Jack and Henry cleared a path through the rocks, wide enough for cattle to walk through safely. They built a rough fence around the spring to keep the animals from trampling the area. They created a system of troughs to collect the water. Takala helped too, working alongside them in the sun. She was strong and did not complain, even when the work was difficult. Jack saw her differently now. She was not just a stranger he had rescued. She was a partner, someone who had given him hope when he had none. On the 4th day, they moved the cattle. It was slow and difficult, but one by one, the animals made their way to the hidden canyon. When they smelled the water, they became excited, moving faster, pushing forward. Jack had to hold them back to keep them from running and hurting themselves. Finally, all 12 cattle were at the spring, drinking deeply, their tails swishing with contentment. Jack stood watching them, feeling a joy he had not felt in months. We did it, he said to Takala, who stood beside him. Yes, she said simply. That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky orange and pink, Jack and Takala sat on the porch. Henry had gone to bed early, exhausted from the hard work. Can I ask you something? Jack said quietly. Takala nodded. Why were you alone in the desert that day? What happened to you? Takala was quiet for a long time. Jack thought she would not answer. Then she spoke, her voice low and sad. I ran away, she said. 2 weeks had passed since the cattle found water. The animals were looking better, gaining weight and strength. Jack felt hope returning to his heart. The drought was still going on, but at least his ranch had a fighting chance now. Takala had settled into life on the ranch. She cooked meals, mended clothes, and helped with the animals. She moved quietly through the house like a shadow, but Jack noticed everything she did. She was smart and hardworking, and she never complained. But something was changing in the town of Copper Ridge. Jack noticed it on his weekly trip to buy supplies. He walked into the general store, and the conversation stopped. People turned to look at him, then looked away quickly. Mrs. Henderson, who usually smiled and asked about his ranch, just nodded coldly and went back to stacking cans on the shelf. At the counter, Mr. Patterson, the store owner, added up Jack's purchases without meeting his eyes. That will be $8.50, Mr. Patterson said in a flat voice. Jack paid and started to leave when Patterson spoke again. Heard you got yourself a new ranch hand, Patterson said. His voice was neutral, but Jack heard the judgment underneath. I do, Jack said carefully. She's been a great help. Patterson's eyebrows went up. She? You mean that Apache woman? Jack felt his jaw tighten. Her name is Takala, and yes, she works on my ranch. Several people in the store were listening now, not even pretending to shop. That's dangerous, Morrison, said a man named Wyatt, a rancher from the north side of town. Having one of them on your property. How do you know she won't steal from you? Or worse, signal her people to attack. Takala saved my ranch, Jack said firmly. She showed me a water source when my cattle were dying. I trust her completely. You're a fool, Wyatt said, shaking his head. Apache can't be trusted. Everyone knows that. Jack felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. I've known plenty of white men who couldn't be trusted either. Good and bad comes in all colors. He walked out of the store before anyone could say more, but he felt their eyes on his back and he heard the whispers start as soon as the door closed. On the ride home, Jack felt worried. He knew small towns talked. He knew how gossip could spread like wildfire. But Takala had done nothing wrong. She deserved respect, not judgment from people who had never even met her. When he got back to the ranch, Takala was hanging laundry on a rope line between two posts. She looked up when she heard his horse, and Jack saw concern cross her face. What happened? She asked. She was getting better at reading his moods. Jack climbed down from Silver and carried the supply bags to the house. Nothing important. Just small-town foolishness, but Takala was not fooled. She followed him inside and waited. Jack sighed and told her about what happened at the store. As he spoke, he saw her face grow sad but not surprised. I should leave, Takala said quietly. I am causing you trouble. No, Jack said firmly. You are not causing anything. Ignorant people cause trouble, not you. This is your home now if you want it to be. They will not accept me, Takala said. They will make your life hard. Let them try, Jack said. I'm not scared of gossip, but the gossip got worse. Over the next week, 2 of Jack's neighbors stopped talking to him completely. When he rode past their properties, they turned away. The minister's wife, who had always been kind, crossed the street when she saw him coming. Henry heard the talk too when he went to town for supplies. He came back looking troubled. Boss, people are saying some mean things, Henry said. They're saying you're too friendly with that Apache girl. They're saying it ain't proper. Jack felt his anger growing. What I do on my own ranch is my business. I agree with you, Henry said quickly. But I thought you should know what they're saying. That evening, Jack and Takala sat on the porch as the sun went down. It had become their routine, these quiet moments at the end of the day. Jack found himself looking forward to them. Can I ask you something? Takala said. Of course. Why do you defend me? You could send me away and make your life easier. Why do you not do this? Jack thought about it for a moment. Because sending you away would be wrong. You saved my ranch. More than that, you've become... He paused, searching for the right word. You've become a friend. I don't abandon friends just because other people don't like them. Takala looked at him with an expression he could not read. Then she said softly, You are a good man, Jack Morrison. Your grandmother raised you well. My mother, Jack corrected with a small smile. My grandmother died before I was born. But yes, my mother taught me to treat people with respect. They sat in comfortable silence until the stars came out. 3 nights later, everything changed. Jack woke to the sound of horses outside. Many horses. He sat up quickly, his heart pounding. The clock on his wall said it was past midnight. He grabbed his rifle and went to the window. In the moonlight, he saw 3 men on horses near his fence. They were Apache warriors, and they were looking at his house. Jack felt fear grip his chest. Had Wyatt been right? Was this an attack? Then he heard Takala's voice behind him, urgent and scared. My brother, she whispered. That is my brother, Nige. Jack turned to look at her. She was standing in the doorway of her small room, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale. What does he want? Jack asked. Me, Takala said simply. He has come for me. Jack set his rifle down. If these men wanted to attack, they would have done it already. They were waiting for something. I should go talk to them, Takala said. Not alone, Jack said. I'll come with you. Jack, no. They might hurt you. Then we'll take that risk together, Jack said firmly. They walked outside slowly, Jack's hands visible and empty to show he meant no harm. The 3 Apache men sat on their horses, watching them approach. One of them, the tallest, climbed down and walked forward. He was young, maybe 25, with long black hair and hard eyes. He looked at Takala and spoke in Apache, his voice sharp and angry. Takala answered in the same language, her voice pleading. Jack could not understand the words, but he understood the emotion. This was a family argument, and it was serious. The man, Nietzsche, turned to look at Jack. He studied him for a long moment, then spoke in broken English. "You are the white man who keeps my sister?" Nietzsche said. "I am the man who saved her life," Jack said carefully. "She was dying in the desert. I brought her to my home and helped her heal. She brings shame to our family," Nietzsche said, his voice hard. "She ran from her duty. She must return." "She ran from a marriage she did not want," Jack said. "That is not shameful. That is brave." Nietzsche's eyes flashed with anger. "You do not understand Apache ways. You do not speak of things you do not know." "I know that forcing someone to marry against their will is wrong," Jack said, his voice steady. In any culture, in any language. Nietzsche looked like he might strike Jack. One of the other warriors said something in Apache, a warning or advice. Nietzsche took a breath and turned back to Takala. They spoke again in Apache, their voices rising and falling. Takala was crying now, tears running down her face. She was begging, but for what, Jack could not tell. Finally, Nietzsche said something final and turned away. He climbed back on his horse. Before he rode off, he looked at Jack one more time. "She is my sister," Nietzsche said. "My blood. I will return for her. And when I do, you will not stop me." The three warriors rode away into the darkness, and Jack and Takala stood alone in the moonlight. Takala's legs gave out, and she sank to her knees, sobbing. Jack knelt beside her, not touching her, just being there. "What did he say?" Jack asked gently. "What did you talk about?" Takala wiped her eyes and spoke in a broken voice. "He said I have 7 days. 7 days to come home on my own. Or he will come back with more warriors and take me by force. He said if I do not return, the warrior I was supposed to marry will declare blood debt against our family." "What does that mean?" Jack asked. "It means my family will be in danger," Takala said. "My father, my mother, my young sister. The warrior and his family will have the right to take revenge on them for my shame." Jack felt anger and helplessness mix in his chest. "That's not right. You shouldn't be punished for wanting to choose your own life." "It is our way," Takala said sadly. "I knew this would happen when I ran. I knew the consequences. I hoped I could be free even for a little while." They sat in the dirt outside Jack's house, and Jack felt like the world was closing in. He had no right to interfere in Apache family matters. He had no claim on Takala. She was not his wife or his family. She was just a woman who had saved his ranch and had somehow become important to him in a way he was afraid to examine too closely. "What do you want to do?" Jack asked finally. Takala looked at him with tired eyes. "I do not know. If I go back, I lose my freedom forever. But if I stay, my family suffers. There is no good choice." "There has to be another way," Jack said. "There is not," Takala said simply. "I have 7 days. Then I must decide." They went back inside, but neither of them could sleep. Jack sat at his kitchen table, thinking hard. There had to be a solution. There had to be a way to help Takala without putting her family in danger. The next morning, Henry noticed the tension immediately. "What happened?" he asked. Jack told him about the midnight visit and the 7-day warning. Henry whistled low. "That's a tough spot," Henry said. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," Jack admitted. The morning after Daniel Cooper brought the warning, Jack rode into Copper Ridge. He needed to see the county clerk and check his property records. If a mining company was claiming part of his land, he needed to know exactly where his boundaries were. Takala wanted to come, but Jack convinced her to stay at the ranch with Henry. The town people were already gossiping about her. He did not want to make things worse. The county office was a small wooden building near the courthouse. Inside, Mr. Graves, the clerk, sat at a desk covered in papers and maps. He was an old man with spectacles that slid down his nose. "Morning, Morrison," Graves said, looking up. "What brings you in?" "I need to see my property deed and the survey maps," Jack said. "I heard there might be some dispute about boundaries." Graves frowned and pushed his spectacles up. "You too, huh? You're the third rancher this week asking about this. Let me get your file." He went to a tall cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. He spread the papers on his desk and Jack leaned in to look. "Here's your deed." Graves said, pointing to an old document with fancy writing. Registered to your grandfather in 1847. The boundaries are marked here, here, and here. Jack studied the map carefully. The eastern boundary of his property went into the Rocky Hills. The hidden canyon where the spring was located appeared to be inside his land, but just barely. Maybe 50 feet inside the line. That's mighty close to the edge, Graves observed. If someone wanted to argue about it, they could make a case that the survey was wrong. But it's still my land, right? Jack asked. According to these documents, yes, Graves said. But I heard the mining company has their own surveyors. They're claiming that the old surveys were inaccurate, that the boundaries are actually in different places. Jack felt anger building in his chest. They can't just redraw property lines because they want to. They can if they've got good lawyers and money, Graves said grimly. I've seen it before. Big companies from back east come in with their fancy paperwork and confuse everyone. Before you know it, honest people lose their land. What can I do? Jack asked. Get yourself a lawyer, Graves said. And make sure you've got witnesses who can testify about where the boundaries really are. Jack thanked him and left, his mind racing. He did not have money for a lawyer. The drought had taken most of his savings, but he had to fight this somehow. As he walked to his horse, he nearly ran into a man in a fine suit. The man was tall and thin, with slicked back hair and cold eyes. Excuse me, the man said, though his tone was not apologetic. Are you Jack Morrison? I am, Jack said warily. My name is Richard Dalton. I represent the Continental Mining and Water Company. I believe you own the property adjacent to some land we're surveying. That land is mine, Jack said flatly. All of it. Dalton smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. That's actually what I wanted to discuss with you. You see, our survey team has discovered that a significant water source exists in that rocky area. According to our calculations, that water source is on public land, not private property. Your calculations are wrong, Jack said, his voice hard. Perhaps, Dalton said smoothly, or perhaps the original survey was wrong. These things were done hastily 40 years ago with crude equipment. We have modern instruments that are much more accurate. Modern instruments that just happen to move my property line in your favor, Jack said. Dalton's smile disappeared. Mr. Morrison, let me be direct. That water is valuable, very valuable. We are prepared to pay you $2,000 for the disputed land. That's more than fair. $2,000 was a fortune. It was more money than Jack had ever seen at one time. But it would also mean giving up the spring that had saved his ranch. The water is not for sale, Jack said. Everything is for sale, Mr. Morrison, Dalton said coldly. If you refuse our generous offer, we will take this matter to court. And I assure you we will win. You will lose the water and get nothing for it. Jack felt trapped, but he stood his ground. Do what you have to do. But that spring is on my land and I'm keeping it. Dalton's eyes narrowed. You are making a mistake. A very expensive mistake. He walked away. And Jack stood there feeling like he had just made an enemy of a powerful man. When Jack got back to the ranch, he found Takala and Henry waiting anxiously. What did you learn? Henry asked. Jack told them everything. About the property records, about Dalton and the mining company's offer, about the threat of a court battle. $2,000 is a lot of money, boss, Henry said quietly. It is, Jack agreed. But without that water, this ranch is worthless. And it's the principle of the thing. That land is mine. Takala had been quiet, listening carefully. Now she spoke. This man, Dalton, he was in town 2 weeks ago. I saw him from the window when I went with you for supplies. He was talking to the surveyor. They were looking at maps and pointing toward the hills. Jack felt a cold realization settle over him. They were following you. They knew you knew where the water was. I led them right to it, Takala said, her voice full of guilt. This is my fault. No, Jack said firmly. This is their fault for trying to steal what isn't theirs. That evening, as the sun set, Jack sat on the porch trying to figure out what to do. He had no money for lawyers. He had no political connections. He was just a small rancher against a big company. Takala came and sat beside him. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to dark blue. Tomorrow is the 7th day, Takala said quietly. Night will come. Jack had been so focused on the mining company problem that he had almost forgotten. Almost. What will you tell him? Jack asked. I do not know, Takala said. I have thought about it every moment and I still do not know. Jack wanted to tell her to stay. He wanted to say that he would protect her, that he would fight her brother and the whole Apache nation if he had to. But he knew that was foolish pride talking. He could not fight tradition and family. He had no right to. "Whatever you decide," Jack said carefully, "I want you to know that you have given me more than water for my cattle. You have given me hope when I had none. You have been a true friend." Takala looked at him, and in the dim light Jack saw tears in her eyes. "Jack Morrison," she said softly, "in another life, in another world, things might have been different between us." Jack felt his heart clench. He understood what she was saying. He had felt it too, the growing connection between them. But the world was not kind to people from different worlds who tried to come together. "I know," he said quietly. They sat there, close but not touching, until the stars filled the sky. The next morning, Jack woke early. He fed the cattle, checked the spring, did all his normal chores. But his mind was elsewhere. Today Naiche would come. Today Takala would have to decide. Around noon, riders appeared on the horizon. Not 3 this time, but 6. Naiche had brought more warriors, just as he had promised. Takala came out of the house, her face calm but pale. She had dressed in traditional Apache clothing, a leather dress with beadwork that Jack had never seen before. She looked like she was preparing for something important. Jack stood beside her as the warriors rode up. Naiche climbed down from his horse, his face hard and unreadable. He spoke to Takala in Apache, and she answered. Their voices were formal, ceremonial almost. This was not a conversation. It was a judgment. Then something unexpected happened. While Naiche and Takala were talking, Jack saw movement on the other side of his property. 4 men on horses were riding toward the spring. One of them was Richard Dalton. "Wait," Jack said, interrupting the Apache conversation. "Look there." Everyone turned to look. The 4 men were riding confidently onto Jack's land like they owned it already. Naiche's eyes narrowed. He said something to one of his warriors, who rode quickly toward the intruders. Jack and Naiche, despite their conflict, both knew what was happening. Someone was trespassing. The warrior came back and spoke rapidly in Apache. Whatever he said made Naiche's face darken with anger. "What is it?" Jack asked. Naiche looked at him, and for the first time, Jack saw something other than hostility in his eyes. "Those men say they are measuring land," Naiche said in his broken English. "They say the sacred spring belongs to their company now." Jack felt a surge of hope. This was the connection he had been looking for. "That spring is sacred to your people?" Jack asked. "Yes," Naiche said. "For many generations. My grandmother's grandmother knew that place. It is holy ground." "Then we have the same enemy," Jack said. "That company wants to take the spring from both of us. They want to destroy it, to mine the land around it." Naiche studied Jack's face, looking for lies. Then he turned and spoke rapidly to his warriors. There was a quick discussion in Apache, voices overlapping. Takala spoke up too, adding something urgent. Jack wished desperately that he could understand what they were saying. Finally, Naiche turned back to Jack. "You stop these men from taking the sacred water?" he asked. "I'm trying to," Jack said. "But they have lawyers and money. They claim my property boundaries are wrong, that the spring is on public land." "Public land?" Naiche said the words like they tasted bad. "That is our land. Apache land. Before any white men came, we knew that spring." An idea was forming in Jack's mind. A crazy idea, but maybe the only chance they had. "What if we prove it together?" Jack said. "What if you and your people testify that the spring has been a sacred site for generations?" The next 3 weeks were the hardest of Jack Morrison's life. The mining company moved fast, filing legal papers and bringing their case to the territorial judge in Tucson. Jack had to find a lawyer, and the only one he could afford was old Samuel Tucker, a man who had not been in a courtroom in 5 years. "I'll be honest with you, Jack," Tucker said, sitting in Jack's kitchen with papers spread everywhere. "This is going to be difficult. Continental Mining has top lawyers from New York. They have money and influence. We have property records and your word. We also have witnesses," Jack said. "The Apache people who know the spring, who have known it for generations." Tucker looked uncomfortable. "That's the tricky part. Getting a judge to listen to Apache testimony, well, that's rare. Very rare. But it's allowed, right?" Jack asked. "Legally they can testify?" "Yes, legally," Tucker admitted. "But judges are people too, and people have prejudices. I'm just warning you, it might not go the way we hope." Jack understood, but he had no other choice. Takala spent those 3 weeks in a strange kind of waiting. Naiche had gone back to their people to talk to their father, and to the warrior she had been promised to. She did not know what would happen, but at least she had time. Time to work, time to think, time to be on the ranch with Jack. They worked side by side every day, strengthening their case. They marked the old boundary stones that Jack's grandfather had placed. They documented the spring, taking measurements and making drawings. They even found Jack's grandfather's old journal, which mentioned discovering the Rocky Hills and setting the eastern boundary. In the evenings, they still sat on the porch and talked. But now there was a heaviness between them, an awareness that their time might be limited. "What will you do if the judge rules against you?" Takala asked one night. "I don't know," Jack said honestly. "Without the spring, I cannot keep the ranch. I would have to sell, move somewhere else. Start over. Where would you go?" Jack looked at the stars. "Maybe California. I hear there is good ranch land there. Or north to Montana. I've always wanted to see that country." "You would leave this place?" Takala asked. "Your grandfather's ranch?" Jack felt the pain of that thought. "If I had no choice, yes. But I'm going to fight like hell to keep it." "And what about me?" Takala asked softly. "What happens to me?" Jack turned to look at her. In the moonlight, she was beautiful, her dark eyes reflecting the stars. He wanted to tell her so many things. He wanted to say that he had fallen in love with her, that he wanted her to stay forever, that he would fight anyone who tried to take her away. But he could not say those things. The world was not ready for a white rancher and an Apache woman. The world would never accept them. "You are free, Takala," Jack said quietly. "Whatever happens, you are free. If your brother arranges for you to stay here, you stay. If you must go back, you go. If you want to run again and go somewhere new, I will help you. Your life is yours." Takala reached out and took his hand. It was the first time they had touched like that, just held hands in the darkness. "I do not want to be free alone," she whispered. "I want to be free with someone who understands me." Jack squeezed her hand gently. "I understand you." They sat like that for a long time, hands linked, not speaking, just being together under the stars. The court date came on a hot Tuesday in late August. Jack wore his best clothes, a suit that was 10 years old and tight in the shoulders. Takala wanted to come, but Jack convinced her it was better to wait at the ranch with Henry. If things went badly, he did not want her to see it. The courthouse in Tucson was a grand building, bigger than anything in Copper Ridge. Jack felt small walking up its steps. Inside, the courtroom was wood-paneled and serious, with rows of benches and a high desk where the judge would sit. Continental Mining's lawyers were already there. 3 men in expensive suits with leather briefcases. Richard Dalton sat behind them looking confident and cold. Samuel Tucker shuffled in with his old worn case and sat beside Jack. "Just tell the truth," Tucker whispered. "That's all we can do." The judge entered and everyone stood. Judge Harold Whitmore was a stern-looking man with white hair and sharp eyes. He sat down and looked over his papers. "We are here to determine the matter of property boundaries between Mr. Jack Morrison and the Continental Mining and Water Company," the judge said. "Let us proceed." For the next 2 hours, lawyers talked and argued. Continental Mining's lawyer presented their survey results, showing with maps and calculations that the spring was just outside Jack's property line. He made it sound very scientific and certain. Samuel Tucker presented Jack's grandfather's deed and property records. He called Jack to testify about finding the old boundary stones and about his family's history on the land. Jack spoke clearly and honestly, telling about his grandfather's work, his father's life, his own efforts to keep the ranch alive. He told about the drought and how the spring had saved his cattle. The Continental Mining lawyer asked him questions designed to make him look uncertain and confused. "Can you be absolutely sure where the boundary line is, Mr. Morrison? Your grandfather marked it 40 years ago with stones. Stones can be moved. Memories can be wrong." "My grandfather was a careful man," Jack said. "He measured properly. Those stones are where he placed them. But you cannot prove that, can you?" The lawyer pressed. Before Jack could answer, the courtroom doors opened. Everyone turned to look. Naiche walked in, followed by 3 other Apache men. They wore their traditional clothing and walked with dignity and purpose. The courtroom went silent. The judge's eyebrows rose. "Your Honor," Samuel Tucker said, standing quickly, "I call Naiche of the Apache people as a witness." The Continental Mining lawyer jumped up. Objection. This was not disclosed in the witness list. We only recently secured their testimony, Tucker said. But it is crucial to this case. Judge Whitmore considered. I will allow it. But let us see where this goes. Nietzsche came forward. He did not look nervous or intimidated. He stood tall and proud before the judge. Do you swear to tell the truth? The judge asked. I swear on the honor of my people and my ancestors, Nietzsche said clearly. His English was better than Jack remembered. Tucker began asking questions. Nietzsche explained that the spring in the Rocky Hills was a sacred site to his people, known for many generations. His grandmother had taken him there as a child. His grandmother's grandmother had known it before her. Can you describe the location of this spring? Tucker asked. Nietzsche described it perfectly. The hidden canyon, the narrow entrance, the ancient rocks. He pointed to Jack's property map and showed exactly where it was, well within Jack's boundary line. And how do you know this is within Mr. Morrison's property? Tucker asked. Because when the white men came and divided the land, we watched, Nietzsche said. We knew where they put their markers. We knew what they claimed. The sacred spring was inside the Morrison land. This is truth. The Continental mining lawyer stood to cross-examine. How can we trust the memory of events from 40 years ago? You were just a child. Memory is sacred to my people, Nietzsche said. We teach our children the stories, the places, the truth. I know where the spring is the same way I know where my father's grave is, where my son was born. Some things do not change. The lawyer tried other questions, tried to confuse Nietzsche or make him uncertain. But Nietzsche remained calm and clear. He was a strong witness. Then Tucker called the other Apache men who had come. They each testified to the same facts. They had all known the spring. They had all seen the boundary markers when they were placed. They all agreed the spring was on Morrison land. By the time they finished, the judge looked thoughtful. He called for a recess and went to his chambers to consider. Jack found Nietzsche in the hallway. Thank you, Jack said simply. You did not have to do this. Yes, I did, Nietzsche said. Not for you. For the sacred water, but also, he paused, choosing his words carefully. My sister says you are a good man. She is usually right about people. How is your father? Jack asked. What did he say about Takala? Nietzsche's face became serious. He is angry, but he listens to me. I told him Takala is protecting our sacred places. I told him she is doing work that brings honor, not shame. He needs time to accept this. And the warrior she was promised to? He is proud, Nietzsche said. But I am working on him. I told him that a woman who fights to protect sacred ground is more valuable than a woman who submits without spirit. He is considering. It was not a guarantee, but it was something. An hour later, they were called back into the courtroom. Judge Whitmore returned to his seat, looking at the papers in front of him. This has been an unusual case, the judge began. Continental Mining has presented technical surveys and scientific evidence. Mr. Morrison has presented historical documents and personal testimony. But what tips the balance for me is the testimony of the Apache witnesses. Jack held his breath. The Apache people have lived on this land longer than any of us, the judge continued. Their knowledge of the territory is comprehensive. When multiple witnesses independently confirm the location of a landmark and its relationship to property boundaries, that carries significant weight. Furthermore, Mr. Morrison's grandfather's journal and property deed corroborate the Apache testimony. The Continental mining lawyer looked unhappy. Therefore, Judge Whitmore said,